A time slip drops you into York in 1324, where bread is not a fluffy little carb pillow with a marketing team. It's the staff of life, the daily survival brick, the thing that keeps you upright when winter is trying to delete your entire bloodline. And here's the twist. That medieval loaf was often coarser, denser, and less processed than the soft, ultra-refined stuff that now gaslights your stomach into thinking you're full when you're absolutely not. So why does today's bread hit different? Why can one sandwich leave you bloated, spike your blood sugar, and have you hunting snacks an hour later like a raccoon in a gas station? Because the loaf changed first, then your body paid. In 1324 York, most people weren't eating bread as a side quest. They were eating it as the main event. Grain was ground less finely, bran and germ often stayed in the mix, and the loaf was usually heavier, darker, and more filling. Not glamorous, not Instagram-friendly, but it had more fiber and a slower burn. That matters. Fiber is like the bouncer at the club. It slows down how fast sugar gets into your bloodstream. Modern white bread? That's the Karen who lets everyone cut the line. Today's bread is often made from highly refined flour. The bran and germ get stripped out, which removes a lot of fiber and nutrients. What's left is a soft, fast-digesting starch bomb. Your body breaks it down quickly, blood sugar rises faster, and then, POV, you're hungry again before the meeting is even over. According to the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, whole grains digest more slowly and are linked with better blood sugar control than refined grains. Translation: your body likes the old-school version better than the shiny, overprocessed one. And yes, medieval bread had its own problems. It could be gritty, contaminated, or stretched with whatever desperate nonsense of bad harvest forced into the mill. But the basic structure of the loaf was different. Less refinement, more bulk, more chew, more staying power. In a world where the average person in medieval England could be eating bread at nearly every meal, that mattered a lot. Bread wasn't a snack. It was the engine. Now compare that to the modern loaf sitting in your pantry, all soft and suspiciously cheerful. It's been engineered for shelf life, texture, and convenience. Great for sandwiches. Not always great for satiety. When flour is stripped down and then baked into something airy and easy to overeat, you can end up consuming more calories faster without feeling satisfied. That's not magic. That's food engineering doing a little too much. Important warning: if bread regularly leaves you bloated, tired, or ravenous, the issue may be the type of bread, the portion size, or how your body handles refined carbs, not some medieval curse. People with diabetes, insulin resistance, or digestive issues may notice this more strongly. Better move. Choose whole grain bread with at least 3 grams of fiber per slice. Pair bread with protein or healthy fat, like eggs, tuna, avocado, or yogurt. Watch portion size. 1 to 2 slices is not a moral failure. If you feel worse after bread, track the pattern for a week. Avoid treating white bread like it's just bread and eating it alone. Assuming multigrain automatically means healthy. Ignoring repeated bloating, fatigue, or sugar crashes. Health tip: if you want steadier energy, build your meal like a medieval peasant would have wanted if he had access to modern nutrition science. Slow carbs, enough protein, and something that actually sticks to your ribs. The real joke is that the old loaf was made for survival, while the new one is often made for convenience. One kept people going through hard winters. The other can leave you staring into the fridge 45 minutes later like it personally betrayed you. Welcome to the age where bread stopped being a loaf and started acting like a lab project with a crust. The supermarket version is usually built from enriched wheat flour, which sounds wholesome until you realize enriched often means the grain was stripped down first, and then a few nutrients were tossed back in like a bandage on a broken leg. The bran and germ, the parts that carry much of the fiber, oils, and naturally occurring vitamins, get removed during roller milling. What survives is mostly the starchy endosperm, the soft white stuff that makes bread fluffy, cheap, and easy to overeat. And then the ingredient list starts looking like a hostage note. High fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, dough conditioners, emulsifiers, preservatives, enzymes with names that sound like they were invented by a committee in a basement. None of these automatically make bread poison, but together they turn a simple staple into a hyper-processed product designed for shelf life, softness, and mass appeal. In other words, Convenience first, satiety somewhere in the basement, probably tied up. Why does that matter to you? Because your body is not impressed by marketing. It cares about structure. Whole grains come with fiber, and fiber slows digestion like a bouncer at the door. Strip that away, and the starch hits faster. Add sugar, refined flour, and oils that make the texture feel fresh for longer, and you've got a loaf that can go down easy and leave you hungry again before your brain has finished pretending lunch happened. According to the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, whole grains are linked with better blood sugar control than refined grains. That's not medieval superstition. That's your metabolism filing a complaint. The roller mill changed everything. Before industrial milling, flour was often less refined, more variable, and more likely to keep the grains rougher, darker parts. After roller milling took over in the 19th century, flour became whiter, finer, and easier to store and ship. Great for factories, less great for the actual human being who has to live inside the consequences. The bran and germ were treated like unwanted extras in a reality show, cut for being too much, even though they were doing the useful work. Important warning: if bread leaves you bloated, sleepy, or weirdly ravenous, the issue may be the type of bread, the portion size, or how your body handles refined carbs. People with diabetes, insulin resistance, or digestive issues may notice this more strongly. Lamb. Choose bread with whole grains as the first ingredient. Look for at least 3 grams of fiber per slice. Pair bread with protein or healthy fat, like eggs, tuna, avocado, or yogurt. Keep portions realistic. 1 to 2 slices is a meal tool, not a personality trait. Lamb. Assuming wheat bread automatically means whole grain. Falling for multigrain when the grains are mostly decorative. Eating refined bread alone and then acting shocked when hunger comes back like a sequel nobody asked for. Succo. If you want steadier energy, build your meal like your blood sugar has rent due. Use slower carbs, add protein, and don't let the bread be the whole show. A sandwich with actual substance beats a fluffy carb cloud pretending to be lunch. The ugly truth is that modern bread is often engineered to be soft, sweet, and shelf-stable, not necessarily satisfying. It's the culinary equivalent of a polite liar. It looks harmless, it tastes familiar, and then it quietly sends you back to the pantry. Tam Kao Y Kin Bacsi Truoc Kai Ap Dong, especially if you have diabetes, IBS, celiac disease, or ongoing digestive symptoms. If bread regularly causes severe bloating, pain, diarrhea, or blood sugar swings, talk to a clinician. Don't just gaslight yourself with "it's probably fine." What survived the oven was not bread. But the real twist is not the loaf itself. It's the wheat inside it, the crop that got redesigned for industrial survival, not your gut's emotional well-being. The miracle that changed wheat was not a medieval miracle at all. It was Borlaug's miracle wheat, the semi-dwarf breeding breakthrough that helped launch the Green Revolution in the mid-20th century. Norman Borlaug and other breeders pushed wheat towards shorter stalks, sturdier stems, and much higher yields. That mattered because tall wheat under heavy fertilizer can flop over like a drunk knight in a mud pit. Shorter wheat stands up better, takes more nitrogen, and produces more grain per acre. According to the Nobel Prize Foundation, Borlaug's work helped transform harvests across Mexico, India, Pakistan, and beyond. Here's the deal. Once farming became obsessed with output, wheat stopped being selected mainly for survival in a field and started being selected for performance in an industrial system. More grain, more uniformity, more compatibility with fertilizer, mechanized harvesting, milling, and shipping. That pressure did not just change the plant's height. It changed what got prioritized inside the kernel. Modern breeding focused on traits like higher yield per acre, shorter, stronger stems, synchronized ripening, better response to fertilizer, disease resistance, easier processing for factories. And yes, the wheat genome is complicated as hell. Wheat is a polyploid crop, meaning it carries multiple sets of chromosomes, which gives breeders a giant genetic playground and also a giant headache. Over decades, breeders crossed, selected, and reselect wheat lines to fit industrial agriculture. The result was not one single evil mutation. It was a long, relentless squeeze from the market, the mill, and the combine harvester. Gluten under pressure. Now let's talk about gluten, because this is where the internet usually starts screaming into the void. Gluten is not a poison. It is a family of proteins that helps dough stretch and trap gas, which is why bread can rise instead of behaving like a brick. But when wheat is bred for high yield and strong baking performance, the protein balance can shift. Some modern wheats were selected for traits that improve dough strength and loaf volume. That means more elastic, more workable flour for industrial baking. In plain English, the wheat got better at becoming fluffy bread. But better bread does not automatically mean easier on your body. The protein structure, starch composition, and processing methods all matter. According to research summarized by the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, whole grains and less refined grain products tend to behave differently in the body than highly refined ones, especially for blood sugar and satiety. That's because the grain structure changes how fast enzymes can get in and start chopping starch into glucose. Think of it like this. Intact grain is a locked warehouse. Refined flour is the same warehouse after somebody left the doors open and handed the thieves a forklift. Starch, speed, and the blood sugar roller coaster. Industrial breeding and industrial processing work together like a toxic duo. The breeding side pushes wheat toward high output and baking performance. The processing side turns that wheat into flour that is easier to digest fast. Fast digestion is great if you're a factory. It is less great if you're the human being who has to live through the aftermath. When starch is more accessible, your body breaks it down faster. That can mean a quicker rise in blood glucose, especially when the bread is eaten alone or in large portions. If you have insulin resistance, diabetes, or just a body that gets dramatic about refined carbs, you may feel that spike and crash more sharply. What does that feel like? You know that feeling when a factory loaf goes from oven to your mouth in under 3 hours, and somehow your body is expected to applaud. Meanwhile, a sourdough loaf that spent 12 to 24 hours fermenting is over there acting like it actually knows your digestive system's name. Same wheat, very different behavior. Welcome to Medieval Manuscript. The fermentation trapdoor. Fermentation is where bread stops being just starch cosplay and starts becoming chemistry with attitude. In a long sourdough, wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria spend hours breaking down sugars and nibbling at parts of the grain that would otherwise hit your bloodstream like a drunk knight kicking in a tavern door. That slow process can lower the bread's glycemic impact compared with a fast factory loaf, according to research summarized by the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and studies on sourdough fermentation. Why does that matter to you? Because blood sugar does not care about your branding. It cares about speed. The faster the starch gets chopped into glucose, the harder your pancreas has to work to clean up the mess. A loaf that ferments for 12 to 24 hours often has a different structure than one rushed through production in under 3 hours. The acids produced during fermentation can slow digestion a bit, and the bread may leave you less likely to feel like a haunted vending machine an hour later. POV: one slice of factory bread and your blood sugar is doing parkour. One slice of long-fermented sourdough, and the climb is often gentler. Not magical, not saintly, just less chaotic. The glyphosate question. Now let's step into the swampier part of the conversation, glyphosate. This is the herbicide that gets dragged into every wheat debate like a Karen with a clipboard and a grudge. Glyphosate is used in some farming systems to control weeds, and concerns have been raised about residues in food and about broader agricultural exposure. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans in 2015, while other regulators have reached different conclusions based on their own reviews. That disagreement is real, and so is the need to separate fear from evidence. For bread, the practical question is not internet hysteria. It is exposure, residue, and farming practice. Some wheat may be treated before harvest in certain systems, some is not. Organic standards generally prohibit synthetic herbicides like glyphosate. If you are trying to reduce exposure, the boring answer is usually the best one. Know your source, choose minimally processed grains when possible, and do not pretend every loaf is chemically identical just because it is beige and square. Important warning: glyphosate debates are often louder than the data. That does not mean the issue is fake. It means you should not let a comment section become your toxicology professor. 33andMe and the Heritage Grain Circus. Then there is 33andMe. which sounds like either a secret society or a typo that wandered into a grain forum wearing sunglasses. In the real world, people usually mean modern breeding lines, proprietary wheat varieties, or shorthand used in niche discussions about grain quality and digestibility. The bigger point is this: not all wheat is the same, and not all heritage grains behave like modern high-yield bred wheat. Heritage grains such as Einkorn, Emmer, Spelt, and some landraces have different protein profiles, different starch structures, and different milling behavior. They are not automatically safe for everyone, and they are not miracle food. But they can produce breads with different texture, flavor, and sometimes different glycemic responses, especially when they are minimally refined and traditionally fermented. That is the part worth paying attention to, not the influencer-level fairy dust. And when researchers started looking at people who actually live with irritable bowel syndrome, the story got a lot less romantic and a lot more useful. The Italy 2014 IBS findings. In Italy, a 2014 study on people with IBS found that some participants reported fewer symptoms when they ate breads made from ancient grains rather than standard modern wheat products. It means some people with sensitive guts may react differently depending on the grain, the milling, and the way the dough was handled. Why might this happen? Ancient grains such as Einkorn, Emmer, and Spelt often have different protein structures and different amounts of certain carbohydrates than highly refined modern wheat. For some people, that can mean less bloating, less cramping, and less of that "my abdomen is auditioning for a drum solo" feeling. Florence and the glucose curve. Then there is Florence, where researchers looked at glucose responses after eating breads made from different grains. The point was that blood sugar responses can vary depending on the grain type, the fiber content, and how processed the bread is. Some breads made with ancient grains or less refined flour produced a gentler rise in blood glucose than more processed options. Kansas and the immune system angle. Now let's cross the Atlantic to Kansas, where immune research has added another layer to the mess. Studies there have explored how different wheat varieties and grain components may interact with the immune system, especially in people who are sensitive to wheat or have celiac disease. This is not about fear-mongering. It is about recognizing that not all grain reactions are the same, and not all symptoms are just in your head, which is a phrase that should be banned from every kitchen and clinic on Earth. The immune system is basically your body's over-caffeinated security team. Sometimes it spots a real threat. Sometimes it tackles the wrong guy in the hallway. In wheat-sensitive conditions, certain proteins can trigger inflammation or digestive symptoms. That is why some people feel better when they switch to grains that are less processed, differently bred, or fermented in traditional ways. Again, not a cure, not a loophole, just a different biological response. Ancient grains as practical alternatives. So what do you actually do with this information besides stare at a loaf like it owes you money? Einkorn. This is one of the oldest cultivated wheats. It tends to have a simpler genetic structure than modern bred wheat and is often used in smaller, denser loaves. Some people find it easier to tolerate, especially when it is stone ground and long fermented. Emmer. Also called farro in some contexts, Emmer has a chewy texture and a nutty flavor. It is often used in rustic breads and can be a practical option if you want something less processed and more traditional. Spelt. Spelt is not gluten-free, so let's kill that fantasy right now. But it is a heritage grain with a different protein balance and a flavor that can work well in sourdough or mixed grain breads. For some people, it sits better than standard refined wheat. Nicer options if you are experimenting. Choose whole or minimally refined versions. Look for long fermentation, especially sourdough. Start with small portions and watch your symptoms. Keep a simple food log if your gut likes drama. Compare how you feel after Einkorn, Emmer, Spelt, and standard wheat. Avoid the usual nonsense. Don't assume ancient means harmless. Don't assume gluten-free means healthier for everyone. Don't eat a giant slice and then act shocked when your stomach files a complaint. Don't use one influencer's miracle story as your personal medical plan.